This is John Stahl-Wert, and along with my colleagues at Center for Serving Leadership, we're on a mission to encourage and support leaders around the world to make the biggest positive impact they can make through their leadership. I'm reflecting on the stages of growth and development that are required on our leadership journey. I've said many times that good leaders aren't born. We learn, we grow, we develop, and there are stages of that development that I've watched and you can mark as you look at people's struggles, times that they run into the ceiling of themselves. Recently, I was with a client that has about 160 employees, good company, struggling with some issues at the executive level. They've done tremendous work over the years, and the founder is still present. And they were asking the question roughly, is there something wrong with us that we're having these kinds of difficulties? They're working through some new patterns of how you exercise executive leadership when you're at a company of that size. They're in several locations now. It isn't just one plant. They have various facilities. And so I pulled out my smartphone and I looked up the data, and I shared this with them. I said there are 8 million companies, roughly, in the United States. And what percentage of those 8 million companies do you think have 160 employees? And, they came up with some guesses, like, maybe 10%, maybe 15%, probably not a large percentage of companies, have reached 160 employees. We can think of a lot of companies like that. Just drive down the road, you see them. And I said, well, here's the fact. The number of companies proportional to the 8 million that exist that have more than 100 employees is less than 2.5%. You may not know this, and I'll just add this here for the sake of what I'm sharing right now. Over 50%, 55% of companies in America have 5 or fewer employees. And we need to understand that the bread and butter of business in any nation is small companies. Human beings who have a job, who earn their paycheck, who are able to pay their light bill, their rent bill, their mortgage bill, their food bill, their car bill, their transportation bill, their medical bill. Human beings who primarily work for small companies. Small companies are the muscle of the economy. And so this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation. 55% of companies in the United States have under 5 employees. And I was sitting with a client that had 160, struggling with questions about why they're having a hard time working through some leadership issues. And I wanted to observe to them that, they're in pretty rare company because less than 2.5% of the businesses get there. Now, here's what I observe. If you watch the growth of companies, you might be thinking, well, the company with 3 employees wants it that way. Sometimes. Or the company with 13 employees wants it that way. Or the company with 30 employees wants it that way. They grew to 30, and then they said, okay, good, 30. Here's where we're going to stay. Maybe the companies are the sizes they are because that's what they want. And sometimes that's the case. But almost always, that's not the case. Usually what happens if you watch the life cycle of a company, it's the person who started it, and then, an employee, and then 3 employees, and then 5 employees, and then 8 employees, and then 9 employees, and then 4 employees, and then 3, and then 5, and then 8, and then 9, and then 2, and up and down, and up and down. Or, it's 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 and 30 and 20 and 25 and 30 and 15 and 20. Or the numbers go bigger. It's 30, 50, 70, 90, 40, and back up again. And you say, what happened there? Almost always what happened there is that the person running that company cracked their head on the ceiling of themselves in terms of their leadership practice. They knew how to lead a team of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, but then they didn't know how to lead a company of 14 and 20. And down they went again. Or they handled the growth changes, the phases of their leadership development, at a larger scale. And they were in the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, but then they cracked their head into the ceiling of themselves and they came back down again. It happens at well understood markers in our leadership path. And I want to just identify two of the things that happen to us when our company grows. But let me stress something. Growth is not an option for a wholesome company. We are always, this is maybe tough medicine, we are growing or we are dying. It's just the way it is. And you might say, well, I just want this to be a company of 3. That is fine. I'm not criticizing. I'm describing that company 3 will end with you. And maybe that's the plan. That is fine. But growth is always happening or we're going in the wrong direction. And so we have to wrestle with the question, if we are seeking to expand our capability, what is happening to us that causes us to shrink our capability? And it is leadership practice. So let me give you 2 critical stumbling blocks in our leadership growth that I have watched again and again and again. You can count on it happening. You start something, you decide you're going to be a plumber or a drywaller or whatever it is, and the customers like it. The marketplace says, "Boy, that's good. I sure appreciate coming to you." Versus where I was going before. And you know what they do? They tell a neighbor or they tell their mom or they mention it, at the club or at the church. And then you have more customers. And then before you know it, you doing it is insufficient. And then you have to begin to, get other people to do it and so forth. And there are 2 well-known, there are more than this, but there are 2 particularly painful transitions that every leader goes through. And the first one I will use just kind of metaphorical language to describe. The day comes when you're running your organization and you've got employees now and they're doing, they're going out to the customer and so forth. The day comes when the leader needs to stop loading their own tools into the truck. Now you translate that however you want to. There is a great enterprise opportunity for people anywhere to choose not to build a company, but rather to build a practice. I'm not speaking to people who build a practice for themselves. I think that is a very, very good thing to do. But if you're building a company where you have employees and you have a larger and increasing opportunities to reach customers, then you get into the business of how do I get my people to behave right, and how do I get them to show up right with the customer, and how do I get them to, to do what I would do in front of the customer when a problem happens, so that the reputation of this company is consistent. I always do certain things that the customers say, "Man, that was great," and so I need my people to do that, so that they don't get the idea that they can't trust the company. That there is a growth trajectory on that. And inside our Serving Leader framework, we unpack what do you need to do to transfer out of yourself and into your people those things, so that wherever any aspect of your business shows up, the reputation, the brand of you, the quality of you, the expectation that people have for you shows up, even if you're not the face there. We talk about that. But there is a day when the founder of that company needs to take their tools out of their truck. What do I mean by that? We, in the creation of something, love the craft of it, and we are the best at it. I think that's the case for founders. We know it better. We've done it longer. In fact, we won a place in the marketplace by doing something really, really good with our tools, with our expertise, and so forth. And we love that work. And when we decide to step over the Rubicon from I will be a solo practitioner, which is a very good thing to be, to I'm going to build a company, we are beginning a journey of increasingly needing to be focused on equipping others to do what we did, so that this company can be beautiful without us, because ultimately it needs to be. We're not here forever. And so what happens to leaders is, they will hire a few people and maybe they'll get a second truck. Again, I'm using metaphorical language. You do the translation. They will hire a few people, but they will maintain their own clients, and so forth. You do the translation. They will do the management of other partners, but they will have their own practice, and so forth. And as the business grows, as the service grows, as the enterprise grows, what your people need from you becomes increasingly focused around the equipping of them and the providing for them of the things that allow them to be successful. And that squeezes your ability to also do the work. And I think I have talked with 100 founders who have described to me that strange and insecure day when they got up in the morning and they went out to their truck and they said, wait a second, I'm thinking that I'm going to check in with my people, then I'm going to do some work. And I got to stop thinking that way. Taking care of my people was the work. Helping this company thrive, survive, strategize, grow is the work. The work is no longer the work. And I am actually holding my company back by thinking I'm going to do the work. I know people who haven't learned that lesson, and their employees are not happy people, and their customers are not happy people. Where's the boss? Well, he's over there plumbing a job himself while we're over doing 4 other sites. Well, we need some things. We can't reach him. So before we learn this lesson, we create problems. There is a day when the leader is heading out to the truck and says, wait a second, I'm thinking I'm going to go and see what my guys need and make a few calls, and then I'm going to go do my work. And that thinking is broken. I've got to change the paradigm. I have run into the ceiling of that way of thinking working. And they say, I'm going to take the tools out of my truck. I'm going to go naked onto the road today. And my guys are probably going to laugh at me like, hey, boss, big boss now, huh? Right? Yeah. Didn't even bring your tools. You're too good for that work. That could be delivered painfully or it could be delivered in jest. Often it's delivered in joy. Workers like to be important when they do the work, and they don't necessarily want you to keep showing up doing their job. They want to be trusted to do their job. So it may be in jest, it may be in joy, like, where's your tools, boss? And you say, well, I left them at home. I really need to serve you guys and not be a knucklehead and go out and try to prove that I'm worth something by swinging a hammer or turning a wrench or whatever it is we do to try to prove that we're worth something. It is a noteworthy moment in the growth and development trajectory of a leader, the day we decide, I'm not going to take my tools with us. It is accompanied usually with awkwardness, with a little bit of embarrassment. We're accustomed to showing our value by doing stuff. And a day comes when we have to stop that. We show our value by developing our business. We show our value by growing our people. We show our value by helping others become good at doing stuff. This is why this first threshold I'm describing is why that old saying exists, that a business owner has to stop working in the business and has to start working on the business. That's why that saying exists. Sayings become old sayings because they keep showing up in reality. And so the first one I'm describing to you is the transition from working in the business to working on it. Strategizing, visioning, imagining the future, planning, finding the resources, developing your people, investing in your people, caring for your people, championing your people. They're the ones doing the work, and we become servants to them. That one trips everybody, and that one thwarts quite a few fatally. And so you get to a certain point in the growth of your company, and man, the wheels are coming off the train because you're not there serving the company enough. And then you have people who are frustrated because they're not getting what they need on time, and you're not, following up with the subcontractors, and the supplies weren't ordered because you're doing the work. And they say, you know what, I'm going somewhere else. Or they're just feeling demeaned because you don't value them enough as the skillful people that they are. And they think, I'm going to go work for someone who really trusts me to do the work. And so we go up, we bounce down, we run into the ceiling, and we come down. There's another one that happens later in the growth of our company. And I don't know at what size one should anticipate this. Because it shows up at different growth markers depending on the bandwidth and the savvy of the leader. It always shows up. The day comes when we turn authority and responsibility for very important decisions over to key lieutenants. Now, this isn't just turning the work over. That's a lower threshold that we need to cross. We graduate up into the boss role and the servant boss role, and our people really take the doing role of the company. That's a lower threshold, but at a higher threshold, we reach a size where there isn't enough of us to make the decisions that matter. And if everything has to funnel back to us, we become a massive bottleneck to goodness and to thriving in our company. And does that happen when we're at 40 people? Could. Does it happen when we're at 90 people? Yeah, likely. Does it happen when we're at 125? Take it to the bank. It happens that we reach a point where our idea of being the one in charge now, making decisions, all the critical things pass through us, also has to be set aside. In a sense, we're leaving another set of tools at home. The executive role and function requires something else of us, which is difficult. And that something else that is required is that we have to trust key lieutenants to make important decisions. And they're authorized to do it. And when we hear the decisions that are made, we have their back. And when we don't agree with the decisions that are made, in the plant down the road or in the division that's in the next state or whatever is the reach of our company, when we don't agree with the decisions that are made, we have grown-up conversations about that, not to undermine and yank back. We're actually in charge here, but as a growing opportunity, because we need that person to be a decision maker. We don't want to reach in and yank back a decision made by a key lieutenant who has authority and then lose that person. Guess what happens there? Our company snaps to a smaller size. This is why we bounce, because we don't break through. We have to break through these ceilings, and we keep cracking our head on these ceilings. And what is that ceiling? That ceiling is us and what we're familiar with and how we think about ourselves and how we think about our responsibility. That more senior ceiling, the executive ceiling, is a tough one because we essentially have reached a size in which we need 2, 3, 20, 30, 200, 300. We call them in Asia C-1, the chief -1. Senior vice presidents, plant managers, general managers taking the helm of divisions of the company that we are the chief of or we are the general manager of. We need we need a leader of a caliber at that C-1 level who, quite frankly, could run their own company. And if we are reaching in and redoing their decisions, and if we are reaching in and undermining or going around them, we don't get to keep that person. When we're down at the lower level and we're the boss, and we've got 5 trucks on the road or whatever it is, we have 35 people, and we go out to our workers who are doing the work, they're doing the doing, and we say, you know what, I need you to redo that. That isn't how we do it. I need you to redo it. We're the boss and they're the doer. We're the decider and they're the doer. That's all right. And maybe we have an employee who quits, but they quit because they don't want to work according to our standard. Up here, when we go out to a lieutenant who, in her own right or in his own right, could run an enterprise, that person has a design requirement built into them to have authority. That's the trickiness at that level. Well, we have authority, yeah, but there's not enough of us to go around. And so we have to entrust, we have to, as it were, delegate, we have to enshrine or deputize authority so that domain agents, domain owners, people responsible and authorized to drive decisions and actions and production and goodness in a domain can. And that requires a change of practice. And so we're no longer reaching around them, or we're no longer sidebarring and asking their employees to come and talk to us. They are the person that is in charge of that, and we protect that. And as I said earlier, when there's something that is going on between us and that person that we don't see eye to eye, we deal with that, at a grown-up level as a learning opportunity. We find out maybe we were wrong in our disagreement with a decision that was made. Good. It's good for me to learn that. Or maybe it was more complex than I understood it. And now that I see the bigger picture, I understand why they made that decision. Or maybe we're just not aligned. Maybe we've reached a point where we understand that person is not fundamentally aligned with the purposes of this company or the standards of customer care or excellence or integrity that we hold. So we have to deal with that. But we're not in charge of what they're in charge of. They are. And we're in a new role. And that one, it's described to me in a variety of ways by senior executives who reach that point. It feels very wobbly to them. They're used to having their hand right on the steering wheel, as it were, the steering wheel of command. And their hands come off and they realize they have others who have their hands on the steering wheel of command. And it's a learning curve of understanding how to guide and guard, and supply and provide and shape the people who have responsibility at that level while honoring them and while understanding and appreciating what they bring to the table. It's interesting to me to watch this. Leadership is not a thing we learn once. It is a lifelong journey of learning. And, we have early ones. I've talked about them where we just get comfortable in the role. And then as growth happens, we have to learn other lessons. It's a little bit like life itself. And you decide to stop learning, and you've really decided to stop living. And in leadership, you decide to settle, and you've begun to conclude that this thing that you were building is going to land, back on the ground at some point, and you're going to put it back in a box and put it away. And that's not what we want to do. There's a final one that we go through. I've talked about it many times. I will talk about it here, and that's the learning of entirely letting go and stepping down and stepping back and turning over, letting go. The hands are off of everything, and now the enterprise is under the command of your successor or maybe one of your children or what have you. That one I've addressed often. These lower learning lessons prepare us for the ultimate one. The final test of our leadership is that things are really great and we're not there. That's the final test. And that's a good one, because we really do want to, at the age of 70 or 80 or whatever you think is the age when you don't want burden and you want to spend all of your time in being a blessing. We want to be thinking from that vantage point about how the people who followed are doing a good job. And while there are always pangs when we learn each of these lessons, I really did like doing the plumbing myself. I really did enjoy the drywalling myself. There are pangs of letting that go. I really did trust my own judgments strategically and decisively. Now other people are making decisions. And I really did like to be at the center of that company. And, now there are employees over there who don't even know who I am. There are pangs attached to these letting go moments. But we really do want, at the end of the day, to bear those so that we can look at the things that we cared about and the things that we did and the things that we invested in and the people that we developed and see that it's all beautiful.
For more information about the Center for Serving Leadership, visit our website at centerforservingleadership.com.